Got her ass.
Well, good morning, everyone, and every day we rise is a great day to be alive. And welcome to Portsmouth Coffee Talks morning show. I'm Slim, and we have our other host, Leah, and the Colonel is taking a little break today. But we have some other special guests with us. We have Dr. Bruce Copeland, who is a regular on the show. It's been a while, but good morning, Dr. Bruce.
Good morning.
And we have Sherry Parker. I almost call her Sherry Brown, but that's her maiden name. That was her name in the neighborhood, in the hood. And we have Wesley Van from Atlanta. Well, around Atlanta. Nobody lives in Atlanta anymore.
Nobody
I don't
lives
know.
in it.
Everybody
Yes,
lives
it
around Atlanta.
is.
But anyway, we're here this morning. We're going to talk about something. And when I thought of this subject, I got some things from some people saying, "Wow, ooh, you sure you want to talk about that?" And and I thought about it, and then I started looking at videos about colorism, and I think all of us had experiences with that growing up, or kind of know what was going on back then, and it's something that still might be sort of prevalent today. So I said, "Yeah, let's talk about this because it could be a historical." Sharing about colorism and compared to racism for people who don't know about it, or it could be something that people just might want to talk about because they experienced it. But Dr. Bruce, I want you to start us off with this. But before you do that, talking about should we talk about this? So I have a little something I want you to listen to, and these are young kids talking about colorism.
Colorism is discrimination against those with darker skin tone. It usually happens in the same ethnic group. Most people think colorism and racism is the same thing, but it's not. An example of colorism is team light skin and team dark skin. And although colorism is inherently anti-black, colorism is not so black and white that it's multiracial and it shows up everywhere. It's like if you see an ad, you might not think that you're like being influenced by the person's race, but you're like subconsciously being influenced. What you talking about? Producers should not gather people for their music based off of their skin tones. It should be based off of their talents. Colorism can be really detrimental to a child's self-perception and confidence, and it really hurts them, especially when it comes from their loved ones or family members. It can show up in Indian commercials. It's everywhere. It's universal. It's not just focused on one skin color or one community. It's time to end colorism in our fight for liberation. We have to make sure that the standard of beauty is inclusive. Every skin tone is beautiful.
Mm.
Okay, as you might wonder if talking about colorism is relevant today, you just heard a bunch of young kids, young folks talking about it. So it's something that still deserves discussion, I believe. And Dr. Bruce, a definition of colorism, and I put that in the title as far as versus racism because colorism is was prevalent in our communities, and in some cases it still is, and a lot of other communities. So, is it comparable to racism? Is that fair to compare it to racism, or is it a form of racism? Talk about that, starting out with the definition of your definition of colorism.
Um, I really do just think that colorism is an issue where people show higher regard for a person who is of a lighter complexion. Um, And I don't know if it's a comparison or not. I think that whether it's racism or colorism, they are both signs of ignorance on the part of the person who has those who have those biases. Um, it's kind of interesting to me that anybody would be struggling with the issue of colorism when 80% of all people on Earth are people of color.
Right.
So the ideal that somebody has an issue with somebody of color, and then the question becomes exactly where does colorism begin? At what complexion do you fall into a category of people who experience some type of lesser quality of respect because of your complexion? So, I mean, how light do you have to be, or how dark do you have to be? So, I just think it's a real sign of ignorance, and I'm not sure why. Well, I guess I am sure as it relates to the historical background for that type of treatment based on slavery, because when we came to America, I don't think colorism was an issue. We kind of saw each other in the same shade of black, but through slavery and interracial um, birth, we've begun to have a broader range of complexions, and I think that it's just another tool to separate us. Now, if people outside of our race um, use color to distinguish us or um, give lesser or more attention to a particular complexion of people, that's one thing. But I think colorism is most egregious when within our race we share those same perceptions. So, um, yeah, that's my perspective on colorism.
Yeah,
And
and
Bruce,
let me
go ahead.
mention too. Let me mention, Leah, that Dr. Bruce Copeland is a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, sees patients. So he's our resident expert that we bring in from time to time. For those who don't know, but Leah, you were saying.
Yeah, as I listened to Bruce, reminded me of a story told by Bill Gates about when he went to Yale. And he said that he was invited to this event on the campus of Yale, and a brown paper bag was placed upon the door. And if you were darker than that brown paper bag, you were not allowed to enter into the event. And he went on to talk about this was even practiced in many of our fraternities, sororities, as well as in our churches for many years. And it all is just a carryover from slavery. You
Mhm.
know, during slavery, if you were a lighter skinned slave, you worked inside the house. If you're a darker skinned slave, you worked out in the field. So it's really a carryover of, I guess, almost like that Willie Lynch syndrome that we carry within us from slavery, as well as even today. I've worked with kids in the community. I've had my kids out in the community, and people would walk up if I can have two children with me, and they would walk up to the lighter skinned kid and talk about how beautiful they are and you're so cute and you're this and that, but not once mention that darker skinned kid who is with me at that particular event. So it's still being practiced within our community.
Mhm.
You know, as children, you say, if you're white, you're all right. If you're black, get back. You
Mhm.
know, and it's still something that
Brown
still
stick
goes on.
around.
Yeah, if you're brown, stand around. You know, so
If you're yellow, you're mellow, or something
if you
like
yellow,
that.
you mellow. Exactly. So, you know, it's something that's still being practiced to some degree within our community.
I think it's something that all of us that have experienced growing up is you. I think we have three people up here from the same neighborhood of Truxton, which would be Leah and Sherry and myself. And you know, as you talk about colorism, we knew it was going on, but in our community, you know, we had large families. You know, in some of the families, you would see that were maybe all of them were darker skin or all of them were lighter skin. And then you had the families that had it mixed,
A
you know,
mix.
different colors with the same parents. So, and didn't see an issue there. It made me think about, the colorism when it came in, at least in this area, it was attached to a socioeconomic status as well. Is anybody Would anybody agree with that? Because I didn't see colorism in our neighborhood, but some other areas you saw that, and it was attached to people on a different level
All right.
economically.
Uh, I saw that growing up, Slim. Right there in Portsmouth, you had the Watts family and the Coldens, and they
Yes.
were they were very people of a lighter hue. And it seemed like to me as a kid growing up, they were people of means and wealth. I mean, even growing up, Darrell Green and I were the best of friends. And in the mid 60s, we could go into when they still had countertops in the pharmacy. There was one that Alexander Corner in particular that we would go in as a group, and Greener would always get waited on way before I would. Within my own family, the Vans. If
Yes.
you look at my grandmother and her
Hmm.
two sisters, the Sensabar girls, were of a great lighter hue. And when they got married, they married very dark men, actually. And as my grandmother used to say, always look out for your children, which became part of the families. You did that. Also, just recently, I was in my wife's hometown of Natchitoches, Louisiana, and
Mm.
that's one of the first parishes there in Louisiana. But the history of Natchitoches. It was founded and started. I believe it was what did they call it? Not mulatto, Creole,
Creole. Yes.
Creoles, and this whole thing, and it got distorted because Creoles became they were the original Creoles were Spanish and France. It was a combination with a little African slave blended in, and then as time grew through Louisiana, and I can use Louisiana because that to me is one of the melting pots
It
of
is.
colorism because and they were very very distinct about it. There again, back in Virginia, you had what's that town? Charles City, Virginia, where
Charles,
everybody in that
that's where
town
my
is,
father's from. My
yeah,
father,
they're all related there, and they did that because they wanted to keep that hue within the family.
That's right.
And as children, we grew up in the 50s and 60s doing segregation, and people would. My grandmother was one of those that would be downtown, and I would see her, and because I was of one of the grandchildren of the darker hue, I wouldn't be spoken to when she would be downtown conducting business, because she might have been passing time. We had a whole lot of, especially on the Zanzibar side of the family, that passed, and we were put into, like you were saying, Dr. Bruce. We were put into that because of the ignorance of those people that were in control and had the power. Uh, that Willie Lynch syndrome. I'm so glad to hear you say that, Leah, because I had written that down as a note.
Hmm.
That was one of the things. I don't know if Willie Lynch was real or not. I've
Yeah.
yet to
There's. Yeah. They're still debating as to whether it was true. You know.
yeah, yeah. But the concept of it, of the Willie
Yes.
Lynch letter itself, when they said to keep us divided, it was one of those things that they used.
Hmm.
I wonder what would happen as I thought about this and looked it up. What would have happened if very coarse hair was actually the good hair,
How about
and to
that?
be extremely dark skinned was the way that we were supposed to be. If and it seems to me, Doc, help me with this. This seems to me to be just a line concept. It's and like I said, in the city of Portsmouth and down in Louisiana and deep down in the South, we really did get caught up in that light skin, dark skin. and it's so funny when Lynn and I first started dating. I carried her home, and somebody said, "Oh, Wes, you got you one of them light skinned girls."
Uh-huh.
And she said, "Wait a minute, hold up, I'm not light skinned. That's old baby here in Portsmouth. You are." I didn't realize until I went to her hometown in Natchitoches how dark she was because she and her mother were considered to be dark skinned
Mm-hmm.
in Louisiana because of they got basically black folks that look like white folks down there.
Mm-hmm.
I went to church with it. I was the darkest thing in there. And I said, I thought you said this was an all black Catholic church. She said it is. I said, I don't see no black folks up in here. But they were. And that's been I've been helped, like I said, Doc, help me see if we had started out in history long years ago, 400 years ago, where we weren't considered to be as divided, where the Willie Lynch syndrome hadn't kicked in, what would this world be like today? Even in countries like India, that's another one
Mm-hmm.
that they
Africa.
have
Africa.
classes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
the
going on in
classes
Africa.
are right in the dark, and you can't go into certain doorways. Even to this day, you still can't utilize it in some of the
And,
smallest cities.
and Wesley, let me get Sherry in here because sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. I think about some of the things, the terms we used to use in our own community, and we've all heard it. They would say, "Oh, that's a nice looking man or woman to be so dark." I
Yes.
mean, we would use those terms, or like, you know, beauty was, wasn't supposed to be dark. Or
Mm-mm.
about the women, if they want a beauty queen, they would say she's a whole lot of yellow wasted. And I've heard
Yeah,
people use that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
I've heard that.
these are terms that we're using against. I mean, for our own people. So that's why I wanted to share it. Because a lot of people, when they think about colorism, they think about the issues that darker skinned people had. Sherry, you being of a lighter hue, you had some issues too, but what people would probably prejudge you because of your color, because of your light skin, saying she thinks she's all that before they even know who you were.
Know you
So
exactly.
you had those issues too. It wasn't just for the people of darker hue.
And I want to go back
Talk
to
about your experience.
something Wesley said. It was really funny when he said talking about people from Charles City. And again, my father's from Charles City
Mm.
County. And a lot of my relatives are from there. But I met a woman in Portsmouth years ago when I was doing foster care, and she was a foster parent. I'd never seen her before. And I went and I met her, introduced myself, and she said, you know what, you look like one of them Charles City girls. And I was shocked. I was like, why would you say that? And then I said, well, my father's from Charles City. She was also from Charles City. And for whatever reason, because of my skin color and whatever, she picked me out as being from Charles City, which I thought was just so odd. But I think we were talking, Slim and I were talking before, and I said, um, when I went to college, I got there, and it's like I went to William and Mary, which was a whole different kind of thing for me. But once I got there, I will tell you, I had the biggest afro anywhere. They used to compare me to Angela Davis because it was like I had to prove almost my blackness to people because I was of a fair skin. And like you say, Slim, people will say, oh, you think you're better than other people. And that was never a situation with me. And one of the reasons I think is because of my mother. My mother was so I don't want to say, I don't know how to quite put it, but the word that comes to me is somewhat militant.
Yes, she was, without a doubt.
She was, she was the type of person who would go into a store with us, and if there was a white person and a black and she was there and they came in after her, well, of course they went to white on the white person. And my mother, I mean, she just at that time when I was young, it was somewhat embarrassing, but my mother would step up and she would say, I was here first and you need to wait on me first. And white people kind of stepped back. But my mother did not, she really made us not look into colorism. So, I didn't really think about that a whole lot until I probably got into high school. And that's where I think people really started making that distinction. But, Slim, when you were saying, is this something that still goes on today? For us as adults and the things that we have been through, we've gotten past that. So we don't really think about it personally, in our own lives. We go on and do what we need to do. But when you started showing or had us listen to those young children, that's when it made me realize that it is very prevalent. It's very prevalent out here. Even though we right now, all of us have gone through that, we've been through it, and we kind of think, oh, that's over. But it's not. It is not at all over. And so I've had to see that in my family. I had a grandmother who she was probably just as militant as my mother. That's probably where she got it from. But she could actually pass for white if you didn't know. And she would never do that, though. I told Slim a story when she was hired in a Jewish law firm, and she was there working. And one day the door was open, and she heard the lawyer discussing these N-words, this and N-words that, and at the end of the day, my grandmother went in and she told the attorney, she said, I'm going to have to quit. And he's like, Ruby, why are you quitting? And she said, because I'm one of them N-words you were talking about. And then she walked out. And that's kind of how my family looked at that. They didn't want to pass.
They didn't realize she was Black.
They did not realize she was Black when she was hired. Because back, we're talking about my grandmother. So we're talking 2 generations back. That was unusual to have a Black person working as a secretary in an attorney's office. But again, my family, having been lighter skinned, were, I say, somewhat militant. I mean, not necessarily out holding signs and that kind of thing, but my mother was always saying to me that nobody was better than anybody else. That was really passing. And Leah, you knew my mother, so you knew how
Very
she was.
well.
And we even got into the thing with hair texture. My sister and I had very different hair textures. And, people would say that I had good hair, although it's like gone now. But I would, be having good hair.
I know that feeling.
And my sister did not. And my mother did not stay in that. So she always said, if you have any hair, it's good hair. And we were always ingrained with that. Even in our neighborhood, Slim was talking about, you didn't see a whole lot of the colorism, not when we were younger. When we were younger, nobody paid any attention to that. So, but I think as Dr. Bruce was talking about earlier, a lot of this has been ingrained in us and came down from slavery. Because again, the lighter skinned slaves were allowed to work in the house. But you got to think about too, where did the lighter skinned slaves come from?
Mhm.
I mean, where'd they come from? So you had the master of the house who couldn't or who wouldn't acknowledge them, but still allow them to work in the house, or they had certain privileges. And that was another way of dividing us.
It was.
Right from the beginning. And it has just kind of been passed down to a point where it makes it difficult, to get rid of that. It's just so ingrained. But again, I think Bruce alluded to it. It was a way to separate us. So.
And Dr. Bruce, I want to, because we also talked about our experiences with Jack and Jill, and I know you with Jack and Jill when your children were growing up, and it's a lot different now. You can compare the Jack and Jill way back then, and also some of the fraternities way back then, how colorism might have had a play in there. But before you get into that, I want to introduce, he came on late, and I had to mute him because he was jumping around and everything. But I think he's all right now, Louis Bracey. And he's another member of our Truxton neighborhood with one of the big families. And Louis, we had talked about in our neighborhood that we didn't so much see colorism in our particular neighborhood because we had families that had people that were had both the same parents, but had family members that were of different shades of color. So it was no room for colorism at that point. But sometimes once we went outside of the neighborhood, there were some issues that we had to deal with. I mean, was that an experience that you had?
Yes, absolutely. I have to apologize. There was an accident locally that messed up our. It hit the communication poles in my neighborhood. Bad accident.
Oh, okay.
And,
Well, okay.
yeah, so that was part of my delay for getting on, because actually this area hadn't had any cell phone thing for like the last 18 hours.
Wow.
And I didn't know it really until I woke up this morning when they announced it. So I'd like to apologize for that.
No, that's okay.
But yes, in my neighborhood and even in my own family, we have that everything that y'all have mentioned has occurred. But the good thing is that like James was saying, we didn't have to worry about that until we walked away from our neighborhood, or we was dealing with other in other sections. In my own family, we have people of different skin tones, and really we never really thought anything about it because we were smart. I mean, we was educated enough by our parents, which is what a lot of people don't do, is explain to them how things happen. And it doesn't matter, because we always say it doesn't matter if you brown skin, dark skin, or whatever skin, you're not the skin that they want you to be. And that was one of the things that Black parents who knew how to talk to you at the time would tell you. It don't matter if you light or dark, you're not one of them. And that puts you in your place right there. So that is what decent and good parents did back in those days, was to keep you in your place and let you know what things, how they gonna look at you no matter what. They'll hit like my father one time said, they'll knock you over the head just as quick if you light skin or you dark skin, because you're Black. You're still Black, and one of the things that my parents used to always say, you're born Black, you're going to die Black.
No matter what color you are, yes.
You don't have to go to no college or no degree to understand the ramifications of how powerful a statement that is. So, so the color thing in our neighborhood, we really didn't deal with it a whole lot amongst ourselves, because we understood, and we were fortunate enough to have parents that enlightened us at an early age of the relevancy of it. But I want to tell this one quick story that one of your hosts was mentioning about how the church, and James, you brought up the thing about the fraternities, and everyone knows that was a big thing in some of our fraternities in college at one time, especially in sororities. One of the sororities, I don't want to name the name because I won't know I get mad at me.
Alpha.
don't do that. Right? Don't call names.
Yeah, I don't want to mention the sorority that was known for that. And I actually had been in the church in the South when I was in the military, and of course now I joined the military in 1972. Our first duty station was down in South Carolina, and on the week, Sundays we would go to church. And I say, when you're not from an area, I'm wondering what those people. The first thing I would go and say, where the Black people at? I wanted to go where my people at. So I said, where the Black people go to church here? Where the Black people get a haircut here? If I didn't know the area, that's what I would do. So I was sent to this one church, and I was noticing that this whole row was empty. And this is 1972. About half an hour later, a whole bunch of light-skinned people was lined up to sit in this row that was designated for them. And I turned and I said, what the hell is that? And they told me what the story was, that apparently this light-skinned Black family was prominent, and they obviously had paid a lot of money for this church. And that's how that it was reserved for them. And so I've seen it my own self with my own eyes, and it's just a shame that we don't have the parents that actually enlightened enough of us at that time so you can have a consciousness of color and how we came to be what we are.
Well, and Dr. Bruce, going back to you, and we mentioned about the you remember Kappa Alpha Psi, and early on you had the Boule, which was sort of like a fraternity, but and then you had the Jack and Jills, and early in their conception, it was colorism involved there. I don't know particularly about many of the fraternities. I heard the stories about some of the sororities, but that's not for me to to say. But I think some of that was going on. But it's a lot different now. So talk about your experience, because my father was a Kappa as well, and he played in the 40s, so it was no issue there. But talk about that, how that affected people back in the day, or probably affected people back in the day. And you get into that mental health thing where people actually want to bleach their skin. I mean, it gets to them to the point where they want to change the complexion of their skin because of the pressure put on them by their own people.
Yeah, I kind of think that it's there are too many isms to debate them all. So you can be caught up
Yeah.
in one ism versus another ism, and you'll be frustrated for the rest of your life. Um, I think as it relates to colorism, as you can see, I'm not of the lighter hue, but it's never been an issue for me. I'm always in spaces where maybe the darkest one or one of the darkest ones in the group. It never really mattered to me. I find that black excellence overrides all of that.
And
Even when
knowing who you are.
yeah, and knowing who you are. Even when you talk about the fraternities and sororities, I've never thought that that would be an issue for me. Um, um, Skin color is kind of invisible to me in that it does not affect who I am or where I'm going in life. I never question that an opportunity isn't mine because of a skin color. Now, skin color could have some effect. Of course, it does, but um, whatever effect it has, if you are excellent in how you conduct yourself, who you are, the success that you have, it overrides it. Even in my family's experience with Jack and Jill, maybe years and years ago, if you were very dark, maybe you couldn't be, or maybe the access to that type of connection would be more difficult. But I didn't have that experience. Of course, men aren't members of Jack and Jill. It's the mothers who have membership, not the fathers. So maybe they would have discriminated against a woman of lighter hue because she had a husband that was my complexion. I don't know, but we never encountered that. What we encountered was that excellence mattered, and then excellence leads to social economic privilege. And what I find was that there was a big issue around, and I'm not saying it's a negative issue, but it was the issue was excellence. It was social economic wealth, and so our experience had been that we have been in the milieu of black people who were excellent, black people who had privilege and social economic status. That overrides, I think, colorism to me. And I think that when we limit ourselves, I'm not so worried about what other people think about us because they're going to always think that maybe they're better because they're white and we're black. And for us, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't know if they put as much emphasis on the complexion. I'm sure they do on in some cases, but the reality is white people who are racist against black people, they're racist against light skinned and dark skinned black people.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
that's the difference.
if you're going to have a free pass in life because you're light skinned and then you can be mediocre as a person, as a person who is successful, you're still going to be discriminated against. Light skinned black people get discriminated against just like dark skinned black people. When white people are the ones doing the discrimination, you may get a little access and a little privilege, but you cannot go through life believing that if you're light skinned, that the privilege is so much greater than it is for somebody dark skinned. I think the great equalizer is your education, your intelligence, your socioeconomic status. Um, poor light-skinned people experience the same type of discrimination that
Poor dark skinned people.
yeah, I mean, so if you're going to be mediocre in life, then of course, um, a darker complexion may add to your frustration. But I just don't think it is enough of a privilege if you consider being light skinned a privilege that you can rest um, your direction in life on that. You can say, "Oh, I can have certain things because I'm light skinned." I'm like, okay, if you believe that, then you go right ahead. It's unfortunate that we believe that about ourselves more than it is that other people believe it about us. We have no control over what other people think. And I think ignorance can be passed down from one generation to the next. And I think it's important for us and our community to instill within our children the kind of pride and self love that they deserve to be encouraged to feel. And I don't think there's a black parent around who says that I love my darker complexion children less. Now, within families, these are not necessarily the parents, but you may have extended family and relatives who may show some preference over the lighter skinned child versus the light skinned child, but that's other people. It's really not an issue for me. I really don't see being darker or light complexion issue. I think sometimes they look at us as being more threatening. If you're darker skinned, you may be perceived as more threatening. And then the other thing I wanted to add, Slim, is this. I think that women have a more difficult time with it than men because women, although it's not fair, are judged more on their appearance than men are.
Hmm.
So if your definition of beauty is lighter complexion, then women have a more difficult time with that. Darker women have more of a difficult time than darker men. And one of the things I think I heard Sherry say was that her mother married, I guess, maybe a darker complexion man. My mother-in-law, who could have passed for white, when I met my wife and I saw my mother-in-law, I said, "This lady is white." She said, "No, she's not." But I mean, really fair complexion. But she married a darker man. I think that sometimes I think women are for some reason, I guess I feel like they darker skinned men don't have a problem
Yeah.
in that way as much. But I think in the reverse, maybe there's some men in our community who may prefer a lighter complexion woman. But I feel like the whole idea of judging somebody on their skin color is so shallow
Can
that
I
you
chime in on what you're saying real quick? You are adding on something that just came out in the news recently. And if y'all already mentioned Serena Williams, have y'all mentioned her already?
No.
No.
Well, if you notice, Serena Williams, it doesn't help our people today when you have celebrities at her level doing what she did. You know, if you notice, she changed her nose and she been doing that skin shading thing that they're doing that some celebrities do now to lighten their skin. She done all that stuff. She changed her nose. She lightened her skin, and not only her but several other celebrity women, black women, have done the same thing. They have done that nose tweaking thing. I used to tell black women that I met who had a wide nose, I thought it was the most attractive thing that I saw, that I knew. And I always made a point to make a point to women that had a wider nose or whatever, uh, to say don't be ashamed of it because that's who you are. Now, all you got to do is look at Serena Williams, even 6 months ago and now, the changes that she made. And then it doesn't help our young people today when, of course, you know what Michael Jackson did. Yeah, some of the stuff was natural, but we all know what he did. Then you look at his brothers and you look at him at one time. Then you see, so that tells our young people today in this time, is there something wrong with the way I look? And then if you know, because all this talent is intelligent, and you know, you all seen to read how a lot of authors and writers have made a point to to bring color into their children's books to give our young people a more sense of pride in who they are. We had another resurgence of. We had a resurgence in the 70s, 80s, and now we have another resurgence again because of hair and because of facial complexions and things of that nature.
But
But it doesn't help when it's
Lewis,
one of
don't you
ours to
think,
do it.
Lewis, don't you think in some of those cases that's a personal vanity thing? You know, somebody, I mean, we have makeup. People wear lipstick. You know, that's a choice as
It,
opposed to being a problem as far as colorism. Some people have a personal choice to
it
change
could
certain
be.
things, and I think the case with Serena, she's always had a discoloration on her face if you ever watched her, playing. So that could be a part of what she's doing there
Yeah.
to even that skin complexion out. So we don't know,
What about the
but
nose?
I
Why
think,
did she?
well,
Why
I
she
mean
just
that's
nose?
also a personal choice as well. That's also a personal choice as well. I bet you a lot of people would do it if they could afford it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Let
Well,
me let me
that
give a
that
minute.
that is a piece, and I'm not. I wouldn't totally discount it, but I'm only saying it because what was wrong with Michael Jackson's nose? Yeah, let's
Michael
say you want
Jackson.
to lighten your skin a bit. What's wrong with your nose? Your nose is a part of who you are. Your nose is what connects you to your family.
Mike,
Just like
Mike,
some people have head shapes in certain families.
And then you
So,
get into
let
you
me
get
help you with
into
that
you
Michael
get into a
Jackson
mental
piece
health
there.
situation there as well.
Yeah, Michael's thing came from as a child. Michael Jackson is what you could, it's a misnomer. He was superhuman. But as a child, his father would often tell me, "Look at you with your little ugly nose. You're just an ugly little thing." He was broken down as a child. And so, as he became an adult with a skin disease, and he had the wherewithal to do something about it, he could make that skin color change. Because I've had people in my family that have had that same disease, and he was able to do it. But as far as his nose was concerned, his was brought on by his father. His father would beat him up about having a big nose and big eye, all this kind of stuff. So he wanted to always please his father. That's one of the things I think Dr. Brooks would adhere to, that men, young boys, and always want to please their fathers. That's why I still say today it's important for young girls that having these babies to make sure that that's a whole different Oprah show. But the men follow their fathers, and so that was Michael's problem. Outside of that, his skin problem. Now you've got, who was that? Was it Nicki Minaj that changed her skin color? One of them, Kim, Lil Kim.
Lil
Was it
Kim changed everything.
one? She did change her, and it was a baseball player that did the same thing. Well, though, that is part of that colorism syndrome. That is part of that. That if I'm lighter, I'm gonna be greater. But Martin Luther King once said that nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. And so sometimes people, we got to, and that's, again, a professor like Dr. Bruce said earlier at the beginning that some of this is just pure ignorance. We just don't understand it. I do see that there are many different things now. We say we won't go call names, but I can remember. Oh, back to Sherry a minute before I get there. Sherry was saying that her mother would go into a store and literally raise hell because in the 50s and 60s, we were under Jim Crow, and Portsmouth was a heavy Jim Crow city. And you go downtown to the famous and they follow you around or they wait on white folks. Well, that was the other half of this conversation. That was racism.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ruth said it, that when it comes to white folks, they don't see color. They just see a black man or a black woman. They don't see the different hues and they don't measure it out. You know, they had that 1/8 law even in the Constitution that you, if you were 1/8, you were considered black. So you could be as white as George Bush and still be considered a black person. That's pure racism right there. But
Well,
Yeah,
color,
and that's racism. And let me, Dr. Bruce brought up something that men don't have hadn't had a problem over the years, and it's probably right, because we would joke on each other and call each other whatever we wanted to call each other. So, sticks and stones didn't might break our bones, but names did never hurt us. But in the case of women, and I want to ask you, Leah, you coming up, and especially being at Norcom, sometimes it could be you at all black schools, and sometimes we could be cruel in our own schools, and
mm,
some women, and as far as women were hard on each other, and then the men not respecting the women because of their color of their skin, because we would say during our days in schools, and guys, you got to agree with me, we would brag about being able to date a red bone, and that's the
oh
term we
yeah,
would use.
that's
And
true.
that was
That's
Can
that
true.
get
was
it.
something where you would get a
That's
pat on
very
the
true.
back for being able to
Mm-hmm.
pull a red bone, which
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
sir.
was kind of crazy because you know at that age it really didn't matter, but you know we were we were conditioned to think that that was better if we could do that and have one on your arm.
Oh yeah.
So, Leah, during your time at IC Norcom, did you see any of that kind of colorism? I mean, we'll use that word.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. You saw it constantly. You saw it sometimes with the teachers and students in the class, where they would show preference to those students who were lighter skinned than those students who were darker.
Mm.
You saw it even in the discipline of the students at Norcom back in the day. So it was very prevalent within the school system. But we go back and say how experience, I agree, you know, I mean, going beyond the school, but I'm thinking about, a 2010 New York Times research showed, it did dozens of research studies, which shows that skin tone and other facial features play powerful roles in who gets ahead and who does not. I see it in the court system daily. You see
Hmm.
people being judged in the court system.
Mhm.
If you're a darker hue, you tend to get a little more time than those individuals who are not of a darker hue. So we can say that we are beyond that time, but it still exists today. Even going into stores, if you're a darker hue, you're more likely to be followed in the store than someone who is a lighter hue. Whether we want to believe it or not, it still happens. You know, I just see it so much still on a daily basis. Like I said, being at the court system, I really see it happening more often now than see it happening often here within our court system. So it still happens. And I'll tell you a case of a cousin of mine who was very well educated. I went to all the Ivy League schools, but he was of a darker hue. And he went for a job. I mean, very intelligent young man. Went to all private schools throughout his life. He went to major schools out there in Massachusetts and what have you. And he went for a job. And the young man who did not have as much education as he had or experiences that he was given the job over him, and that didn't happen like 20 years ago. That happened within the last 10 years. So it's still being done in the communities, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. It is still happening.
Well, I think in talking about colorism, though, a lot of times we're talking about what happens within us, our own, like at Norcom
Oh,
or
sure. Let
different.
me just say it was with a black firm. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
good. So that
I
was
had to,
right.
I had to clarify that. Okay.
That makes a big difference, and that
Yes.
does show you colorism. But one of the things too, I think that was an advantage for us to not have to deal with that was going to Norcom. Most of our teachers there pushed you need to get good grades. You need to get your education. You're just as good as anybody else. And they would tell us a lot of times, you got to be 2 or 3 times better
Mm-hmm.
than a
Mm-hmm.
white person. But a lot of times they did not necessarily uh, go into the colorism so much. They really pushed us, like Bruce was saying, to get your education, to be excellent in everything that you do. And you all know Emery Fears. He pushed us so much that that was his mantra, to get your
Mm-hmm.
education and be better than everybody else. And so that was one of the advantages I felt like going to a black school, especially IC Norcom, but going to a black school gave for us is that it made all of us feel that we were as good as or better than those others who were doing anything. We could do anything that we wanted to do if we just worked hard enough. And so those teachers, that's where I think we got a real disadvantage when things were integrated, because a black teacher can't go into an integrated classroom and say the things that our teachers used to say to
That's
us.
right.
And those things that they said to us were truth. They gave us truth. They let us know how it was going to be when we got outside in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's
We had to
true.
be
That's
judged
true.
on, you know, on our character and our education rather than our color. So I think too, I remember back on Sesame, this is crazy, but Sesame Street with the little kids, when they had different things on there being black and beautiful and I'm black and I'm proud. We went through those kind of things. And I think that made a really big difference when it comes to the colorism, because it let us know as a group, as black people, light, dark, whatever, that we were good enough and could be better than. And so I think again, we get back into that education and the excellence. Those are the things that we need to push on our children and in our families. And I think that's the other thing, Slim, that happened in our neighborhood with our families. Our families were pretty, very much into that. Um, and I know my mother, I know Leah's mother, we got that from our families, that we were and could be just as good as anybody else. So
And
Yeah,
excellent.
and Sharon, you took that to William and Mary with you, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
good that you had that instilled in you to go to William and Mary during a challenging time. The only hiccup you had was trying to prove to your own people about your blackness.
right.
Put the
You
effort.
know,
You know,
Slim. Let me
You
jump
know,
in too. Let me jump in a minute. Here in Atlanta, one of the things I've noticed that's a little different is that Atlanta has always been driven by people of the darker hue down here, believe it or
Mm-hmm.
not. One of the greatest judges here was Judge Arrington, that was here. And he was one of the first black judges. He was the first black law student at Emory University. But one thing he did, and I'll never forget it, it was I had this about 2004, 2005. He shut his courtroom down because he sat there and looked out in the audience, and he looked at all the plaintiffs and everybody that was being adjudicated that day, and they were all black at that time. And the victims were mixed, some white, some black, some light, some dark. He said, I want all the white folks to leave. And they got upset. I mean, they really got very upset. And I happened to be in there that day, and I stayed there. He laid them young boys out. He said, I'm so disgusted with looking in this courtroom, and all I see
Mm-hmm.
is young people that done
That's
dropped out of
right.
school in the fifth grade. One of them couldn't even spell his first name. His name was Quintavious, and he couldn't spell it. He could get as far as Q. And he just got disgusted. But that was the leadership. He got disgusted back in the late 60s, early 70s, and helped turn this town around. You're right, Sherry. We were able. That's one of the faults I find in integration, is that we as a people were able to speak truth. We were able to put the information down where the goats could get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we learned, and Mr. Fields, you're right, he pushed it. He pushed it hard. He wanted us to be who we are. That was the great thing about I see Norcom High School. You look at say Israel Charles Norcom, he was not a light skinned brother either.
He was
Okay,
not. He was not.
so but one thing I look at now, you look at the NBA, and you talk about colorism there, and I get tickled. They pick on what that little boy name from Golden State. Golden State had a lot of little light skinned boys playing for 'em. But then when you got down, they felt threatened going on the inside when they went against the boy that just got put out. Matter of fact, that green boy. But the NBA suffers from it. The NFL suffers from colorism, and I think a lot of it sometimes has to do in marketing and how
Hmm.
and what looks good on television.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
one of my neighborhood bars called Bradley's I go to. It's 95% Republican. That tell you how it is. But they give me my due respect in there because I never back off any debate that they want to have. And I come through with facts and figures. And when you know who you are and whose you are, that scares white folks to death.
I
It
Hmm.
love
does.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So when we get into debates in there, I often tell them, that you have to be careful as to how you look at us because we're coming at you don't know in our groups and black folks we don't white folks can't tell who we are half the time because we were passing for years.
Hmm.
And so they would be talking to black folks and didn't know where they were going, and be giving us wrong information. But in today's time, I think colorism is pretty much playing itself out. But what we have to do now, we've got to get our children to understand who they are and
Mhm.
whose they are.
Amen.
Because they're going down, I listened to Dirty Red, whatever the little girl's name is, and she's
Dirty is
just as
right.
vulgar as she could be. Listen to Nicki Minaj and Cardi B, that little light skinned girl. Well, look at her. I wouldn't take her home. Who I couldn't take her home. No, ain't no way in the world I'd take that girl around and said, look at this. Because it's not like it was anymore. And you're right, Dr. Bruce, we've got to get it in our minds that and it's generational. It's been going on for 400 years. We witnessed the light-skinned brothers get picked over the dark skinned brothers. We witnessed that even and it's still happening. But we've got to understand that's where it goes. And we every now and then we're gonna have to do like Judge Arrington did
Mm.
and just shut it down and speak truth to these kids and get them back on track.
Well, let me say this. One of
And
the
you know
things.
what,
Let me,
Wesley?
let me,
I think it
am I
was in
am I
the.
muted?
But
Go ahead, Bruce. Go ahead,
Oh,
Bruce.
okay. I didn't know. I couldn't tell. Because
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Bruce.
No. You can go ahead. I didn't know if I was muted or not. I'll wait till you get finished.
No,
No,
no, go
no,
ahead.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
was just say that first of um, all of these isms, we things. They're things we don't have control over. We don't have control over our complexion. We don't have control over how tall we are. We don't have control over these things. So these isms, we can't allow them to have a safe space in our mind. And I think the great equalizer in all of this, I mean, you will have people who are short and they will say that there's discrimination against short people. Well, maybe there is. What are you going to do about it? I think that we have to look at how we navigate all of these things in life. And I think one of the things that really, really can equalize, level the playing field is the excellence that we bring to the table.
That's true.
And
excellent.
then so you can be light skinned and not very bright. And I don't think your light skin is gonna overcome you not being very bright. You can be light skinned and not have economic means. I don't think light skin is gonna overcome you being broke. So I think if we concentrate on black excellence and we concentrate on social and economic wealth, you can be dark skinned and experience life in the most amazing way And your light skin, your dark, excuse me, you can be dark skinned and experience your life in the most amazing way. And all of a sudden, the dark skin is not necessarily that big of an issue.
Right.
People really like you a lot when you have wealth. People really, really like you a lot when you're very, very bright and intelligent. And then I
Mhm.
think skin color drops down on those on that list of things that really matter. And so I think in our community, if people are given the impression that light skin is so amazing and it's going to do so many things for you in life, you're setting people up for failure. And I
Right.
think what Sherry was talking about and Leah was talking about and Norcom is, and then those instructors teaching excellence, they weren't
Mhm.
teaching light skinned.
Mm-mm.
They were teaching excellence for all children. And
Mhm.
that excellence overcomes a lot of these things, these superficial things that we zero in on. I would never say that colorism is not an issue or
Mhm.
that light skinned people may have maybe a slight advantage when the judge of who's better is as ignorant.
Mhm. Mhm.
You present light skin and dark skin to ignorant people, then they're going to say light skin is better. You present light skin and dark skin to very intelligent people, they're going to say that doesn't matter. I want to know what you can do.
Right.
That's
So
very true.
and I think that it's the work is for our family and our community. My goal is never to change white people because they've been consistent in who they are, and they're not going to change because they feel a moral obligation to change. So I think our energy is wasted on analyzing and dissecting what they think and why they think it. The issue could be why we think it,
Exactly.
why we
Exactly.
allow this nonsense
Exactly.
in our community. And I will take a bright, intelligent, um, um, darker complexion person or lighter complexion person. It doesn't matter to me. Their skin color is probably something very superficial that may get you a first look, but beyond that, when it comes to trying to prove your worth and how excellent you are, you cannot make it to the finish line simply because you think that you have light skin and that's better. Or you cannot convince yourself that you don't have opportunity or you're going to be a failure because your skin is dark.
Mhm.
Either one of those misperceptions are hurtful. And just remember, we talked earlier about Serena Williams and these changes. Most people don't see themselves and their whole and the beauty that's within or their exterior beauty. A lot of people always say, I wish I was this and I wish I was that. I find people who have so many talents and I see them, but they don't see them in themselves. So
Mm.
many of us probably would make some cosmetic changes if we could. Our hairstyles, women with weaves in their hair, why isn't their natural hair as beautiful as anything else? And again, I would never see myself as less than anybody because of complexion when 80% of the people on earth are people of color. And everybody comes from black people. And when
Amen.
they come from
Amen.
black people, they come
Amen.
from black people who are my complexion or darker. So how can a copy be better than the original?
Mhm.
We all started off my complexion or darker from Africa, the cradle of civilization. So why would somebody with dark skin feel inferior to anybody? It's not because you are, it's because psychologically you allow misinformation to occupy space in your brain, and now you don't feel good about yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
Dr.
Leah,
Bruce.
You
And
were
Dr. Bruce.
talking, but before you say that, you mentioned about I went to my mother one time and told her I wanted to be light skinned. She slapped me so hard I thought she had slapped me light skinned. I had to go look in the mirror because
she slapped
and I never wanted to be light skinned again.
That blue as
and light
well.
and
Yeah.
light skin and light skinned people get discriminated against. It's
They
interesting.
do.
When I hear
Oh
somebody
yeah.
that's light skinned, they're saying that they've been mistreated because they're light skinned.
Exactly.
Hmm.
They don't see it the same way as we see it. We look at if somebody my complexion may look at a person lighter skin and say they have privilege because they're skin, but the lighter skinned person doesn't necessarily think that. Just like white people falsely don't believe they have privilege. Now it's not logical to me, but in their mind it's logical. They don't believe they have privilege when they do.
But Dr. Bruce, the 60s made you black men, you darker black men, the great men that you are. The 60s was when they decided that black was beautiful. And the darker you were, people started gravitating towards that darker skinned black man or black person during the 60s, during the I'm black and I'm proud era. And it did a turn. It did a turn on the colorism at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, Leah, and you know, during that 70 period, I was black and proud, but I was still losing women to light skinned curly haired guys. Just joking. No, I wasn't.
Well, I think there are beauty in all complexions of black people. I think they're beautiful light skinned people, beautiful dark skinned people. I just can't see how we can separate it. It's all complexions are beautiful.
I think it goes back to us educating our children when they're young that black is beautiful.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter what
whatever shade.
What color you are.
Yeah. It was so funny on Facebook the other day. I saw some little girl who was white who said she wasn't white. She wanted to be black. And I'm like, okay, that's great. That's a great change.
Well,
but again,
they want to tan their skin. They want to get their rear ends enhanced. They want to get their lips and noses, all these things. Well, lips anyway, they're enhanced. There's so much beauty in us. They actually know we are. They actually know it. They actually they want to be like us. They want to have the natural beauty that we have, not just in our complexion and our looks, but in everything that we do. Whenever you allow black people access to anything, we dominated with our excellence. We dominated in education, in arts and entertainment, in sports, in politics, in everything that we touch, it turns to gold. So, and they know this, and so their perception of us is not necessarily that it's fear of us at our best, and we can overcome whatever they use to keep us down with excellence. And that's what we don't emphasize enough. We cannot control our complexion. There are going to be dark-skinned babies born. I'm sorry to tell you, that's going to happen. About it. We cannot make all babies light complexion, but we cannot lose. Every child is valuable, and every black person can be excellent, but you have to be intentional about it. And I think what's hurting us more than complexion is that as a community, we've lowered the bar on excellence.
We have.
We have lowered a bar. We accept so many things from our people that's harmful to us. And I always say we're the most reliable conspirators in our own demise. We are. Our other people, we are the most reliable conspirators.
You're right about that.
Because we accept all kinds of stuff. I just want to see excellent light-skinned people, excellent dark-skinned people, and excellent people in between.
Yeah. And as we wind down, some of you all might want to make a last statement, but I was telling Sherry the other day, you know, speaking for the big nose guys, I would always control the narrative. I would talk about my nose before anybody else could say anything. So that neutralized them. What they said about me behind my back didn't matter, but nobody would say it to my face because I had already controlled the narrative. So,
and I bet you that everybody on this call have received more advantages in life because of their excellence than because of their skin color. Sherry was excellent when she went to William and Mary. Leah was excellent. Everybody up here was excellent. That's where they got their privilege from. That's how they navigated their way to success, not because of their complexion. And if you say that you're excellent because of your complexion alone, then I want evidence of it.
Yeah, and that's the real privilege. Yes, indeed.
That's the true privilege.
Oh, the true privilege.
I want to say this. I put on my Christmas shirt because I wanted to say Merry Christmas, everybody. If I don't get a chance to see you or talk to you before the Christmas season get here, so I wanted to give everybody a bye-bye with my Christmas shirt on. But I wanted to follow up on what the doctor was saying, and then I'm gonna have to go because the trucks that fix the communication thing just drove up. So, but the doctor, you hit it right on the point. I want to say you nailed it on the head about the need for us to get to our kids and put those positive thoughts as to who they are. And because that's the truth, we have to talk to our young people. We have to get them to see that everybody wants to be what you already are. And, you know, with our big nose, our big lips, and in some good cases, the big butts, that's who we are. Proud of that. And because I tell you, I tell black women all the time, they had a big march around here just Sunday. They went around BWI. It was a church of black women trying to get other black women to understand the importance of health and everything, and how they have to love everything that they have. And one of the things they say we gotta love our curves. And that's what I'm saying. You know, I tell people all the time, no one has as nice as curves as black women. And that is my attraction. And basically,
light or dark.
Light complexion, got you.
we got to love who we are, and that's the thing. So, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry
James,
Christmas.
again for call. I'm sorry about the delay, because I'm not joking. They get ready to turn things off. So look, everybody have a good day. Okay.
Okay, take care. Thanks.
I'll be in touch.
Tracy.
All right,
Be good.
Lewis, I ain't seen him. in
Anybody
years.
else? West from
Yeah.
around Atlanta?
I'd love this. This is it, and this is one of the conversations that we really need to have more of within our community. And you're exactly right that they pushed excellence. I remember my 25th class reunion at Norcom. That was the topic of my I was a keynote speaker. And I put that they gave us the excellence at Norcom. It was excellence at its best, and that was our theme, matter of fact. And that's one thing that we have done now, and we have got to go back and put it into the generations under us.
Mhm.
Leah, we talked the other day about that crabs in a barrel syndrome,
That's
where
right.
we've got to stop pulling each other back and pulling each other down, and see if we can't lift each other up. We've got to get to a point that we get the family back in place. You know, all this beautiful to see all the Truxton people out there together. And I'm from two communities in Portsmouth. I grew up till I was 16 in Mount Hermon, and then left and grew up in Cavalier Manor. And so I had the opportunity to see all lives of folks that were out there. And it's really one of the things that is important. Colorism, we can handle that. That's something that we can change. That's a mindset change. Racism is something we might not be able to change, because one of the things my wife says sometimes is that you can't out white folks. Okay, you
Right.
can't do it. You just can't do that. And so that's where we have to pay attention. We've got to pay attention to what the school systems are teaching our children. We've got to go back and be on the teacher's side and help the teachers to understand where our children are. Because in today, in our day, all the parents and the teachers, they were against me. I know that. My mama done they
They
planned
work
that.
together.
They
They
hated
work
me.
together.
Yeah, they was working together. They got me too. But
Mhm.
today it's the child and the parent, the
Mhm.
mother in particular. She goes up there and fights and cusses and shoots and beats
Exactly.
with the parents. And so we've got to change that mindset. And then we've got to be careful with our health. You can be as light or as dark, but when your health is bad and you got some curves that don't need to go nowhere, got to we suffering from diabetes. We've just got to look at what is true is obesity, and that's another show for you there, James. is obesity one of the things that we really want to say is okay to have? Not for Black folks, because it makes that's where we getting our high blood pressure from. That's where we getting our diabetes from. This is where we having we need to take care of ourselves. And so colorism has its place. We've done that. We've been there. We used it. Matter of fact, Tuskegee. I was going to tell y'all earlier. Tuskegee was built on colorism. Believe it or not.
Exactly.
Booker T. Washington married. All his wives were of lighter hues, and he used them to get Ford and Rockefeller and Carnegie and all them boys would come up and pull up to the back of his house on the railroad track, and he get them high yellow gas to be up there in that house. And when they would leave for the weekend, he'd had his hand out and he'd be them picked up $300,000 or $400,000. Okay, so it was an instrument that was used. But and a lot of people don't know that history. But we do have to understand, I went to a movie, I said we were invited to a premiere of this movie called Common Ground. You've got to see that. It talks about George Washington Carver, how he developed. He didn't have real education, but he had enough of who he was to make it so that our planet would be saved. And that's what we need to deal with. It's colorism, I can handle that. Racism, that can't change. But we as a people, we've got to come together and make things back on one plane.
All right. Thank you, Wesley. And you mentioned your wife. One of these days, you're going to have to introduce your wife to Post and Coffee Talk because she is a
Oh
legend. She is a legend in herself, Lynn Bond. So,
yeah.
all right. Sherry, did you have last comments?
No, I've enjoyed being here this morning as early as it was. It was still good. No, just Merry Christmas, everybody. Everybody have some happy
Oh
holidays.
yeah.
Be safe. Yeah, that's all. It's good seeing everybody again.
Okay,
Thank you.
Betty
Thank you for
Brown.
Crush on Sherry,
Looking just like Betty Brown at this point in stage this morning.
Ooh, I had a crush on her, honey. That little girl there.
okay. Look, I want to thank everybody. And Leah, somehow you just keep. Okay. I just want to thank everybody for coming on and talking about colorism and having this conversation. I think it's important for people who didn't know. You never want to repeat things that happened in the past, but you have to talk about it for the people here in the present so they'll know about it. And what was encouraging about those young people that I played for you in the beginning, at the end of it, their message was, we have to change. We have to get away from that kind of colorism and things. So that was kind of encouraging. So thank you, Dr. Bruce, for coming on. You always answer the call, and you always drop some knowledge on us from a professional standpoint. We appreciate that. And let's see, Wesley, you always have a lot to say, and we appreciate what you bring to us. But some things don't change. I remember you back there at Northam. Teachers probably avoided calling on you because
they did. I thought it because I was dark. I didn't.
No, not because of that. Because you were long-winded. But anyway, thanks everybody. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. And if we don't see any of you all, have a Merry Christmas. I think we have a show right before that on the 21st. So join us for that. I think we want to talk about the Black church and the relevance in our community, especially around this time of the year. So we'll be dealing with that.
Thank you, Dr. Bruce. Thank you, Wesley. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, everybody. Merry Christmas.
See you later.
Merry Christmas.
Everyone.
All right.
Where are my glasses?